Just a quick disclosure up front, I've been on Aaron King's RTFM podcast and discussed aspects of this essay with them ahead of time, so this video is biased. Taylor Navarro wrote a post about the burden of indie TTRPG design earlier this month. In her post, she describes the incredible workload that comes with making indie games. It's a job with too many hats. The hat of game designer, the hat of layout artist, illustrator, editor, publisher, marketer. She laments the fact that she would absolutely pay her friends to take on these roles, but everybody in the indie sphere is constantly passing each other the same $20, and nobody really has the cash for a project of considerable size. I'm fully sympathetic to this concern. God knows that behind every game launch is between 5 and 1 million unpaid, unseen hours of labor. It reminds me of a co-host post by Chris Bizzett, who, a few months back, admitted to teaching himself how to draw because he'd just grown disheartened by how many people refused to pick up a game when they realized it was just words. It's a conversation I'm sure both casual and professional game devs have heard and lived numerous times. You pour your energy and passion into a project, you get crickets in return. I've been thinking about these conversations while I read Aaron King's Patchwork World. I don't think this game resolves issues of the labor costs and low profitability of indie game development, but I do think it's my favorite response to the issue. Patchwork World uses the Powered by the Apocalypse engine. 2d6, 6 and lower is a fail, 7 to 9 is a partial success, 10 and up a full success, you know the drill. What makes it different from other PBTA games is that it eschews playbooks for a slate of 72 discrete moves from which players can choose. Furthermore, stats go by the wayside, and modifiers to rolls are granted based on what questions you answer whenever you make a move. For instance, when you roll to wound someone, you get +1 if you're defending yourself, and another +1 if you witness your target acting unjustly. We'll get into why that's brilliant in a second, but right now, consider this the core loop of the text. Use weird moves, and answer questions when you do so. But I think one of the things that will immediately jump out at you, especially if you're a person who thinks a lot about layout, art, and the incredible amount of time it takes to pull a tabletop game together, is that Patchwork World is, well, plain. Sure, the text has bits of art, much of it in the public domain, but it's a game where you can see the seams, a game whose appearance can generously be described as basic. And that's perfect. Patchwork World is unconcerned with convention. It does not care about white space or polish. It is a text that cares about its reader, future players, and trusts they will care more about its content than its cover. It's a game that I want so badly to be the model for indie designers everywhere, because it's first and foremost about its words. I think a lot about what a game's verbs are when I write these reviews. They're the way games indicate what they want the player to spend the most time doing. The classic example is to look at how many pages any recent edition of D&D devotes to combat, and, rightfully in my opinion, claim that D&D is a game mostly about killing things. With that framing in mind, let's consider the verbs of Patchwork World. The standard set of moves all characters can take only really offers one violent option, one that, as I said earlier, incentivizes players to use it only when they're acting to protect someone or themselves. Its other default moves are much more about interacting with people on a personal, often romantic level. Stare into eyes not your own is triggered when players are trying to understand the feelings of another, rewarded when the player makes themselves vulnerable in some way. Already, this is a pretty intimate move, made more so by the list of questions it permits you to ask. What kind of game is one that has mechanics for discerning what it'll take to get someone to love you? Side note, this is a rhetorical question. A ton of games have mechanics for this sort of thing. I'll get to you one day, Pasión de las Pasiones. In addition to the baseline moves, Patchwork World gives players a huge range of chosen moves, all of which are weird and unique to this text. Each option prompts questions that both challenge your understanding of your world, as well as make strong statements about the kind of story you're telling. I don't think there's a clearer example of this than Whale Ate My Parents, which asks players to roll plus whales killed to search for your long-lost family. It necessarily shapes the story around your character. It's a big, bright flag waving at your GM that says, hey, please put whales for me to slay in this game. In the Pharmaca move, players may harvest herbs from the bodies of godlike creatures, and then spend those herbs to transform someone. However, the actual mechanics of that transformation are absolutely fraught. When you give the player the option to allow someone to exist in endless pain because of something their character has done, you're making a statement about the consequences of your power. This is further reinforced by the fact that you can take mechanical damage because of how ashamed you are of what you've done. And that just rips, there's no getting around it. Patchwork World trusts players and GMs to make big, important choices about what their characters are motivated by and how they affect the world, and expects them to wield that power intentionally. The effect characters have on the world is significant because this game devotes a large portion of its text to dealing with community. Players are encouraged to imagine the way they all live together, whether that's in a village, part of a crew, out in the wilds, or as part of an order with some sort of code. They're also incentivized to respond to the needs of their home, receiving experience when they abide by goals established by each type of community. Importantly, these communities also respond to player actions, with GMs being given a move explicitly for the purpose of having the community react to something they've done. In fact, I think King goes to great lengths to ensure the community is a vulnerable, living being, not a base to be upgraded or a backdrop for downtime. If the characters do something that might harm their neighbors, the GM is advised to have people speak out about it, call in people from the player's past to try to talk some sense into them, or even have people leave in disgust. King actually describes why they're so concerned with communities and their function in a Tumblr post from last year. The game was written during COVID isolation, from 2020 to 2021, while the United States erupted into a summer of police violence protests after George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, a city King also calls home. During this time, King was understandably thinking about what it means to live in community with other people, especially when that community exists in a world that is fractured and sharp. It makes sense, then, for King to flesh out tools to structure the ways a community might respond to something traumatic or pull together in a time of need. Patchwork World is a game that is so clearly influenced by its author's personal experience, it would be painfully intimate if it wasn't so inviting. Its text is overflowing with helpful advice, friendly pointers on how to make PBTA work for players who might be new to the system, nuggets that are just as useful to longtime RPG veterans. The tone of this game is one of comfort, of being invited to a friend's living room and receiving a mug of hot chocolate as they sort through their library of old books and records, making casual conversation about things they've enjoyed over the years. It's maybe the best way to introduce someone to a PBTA-style game, and King intentionally structured it to be that way, as an off-ramp for players who have only ever run D&D. At the end of the text, King explains why this is technically Patchwork World's 6th edition. It's the culmination of 5 other attempts at creation, the stumbles and incremental progress of decades. It is unique in a way that only the personal can achieve. I was talking with King about this essay, and how I wanted to take the angle that their game is, to some degree, unpolished, certainly not as flashy as half the 6-figure Kickstarters I get ads for. I kind of wanted to give Aaron a heads up before I said their heartbreakingly sincere game was ugly. And thankfully, they understood what I was trying to say, and linked me to this speech by Eleanor Davis, upon winning an Ignatz Award for Outstanding Anthology. In this speech, Davis hits on the exact sentiment Patchwork World pulls from me.
We're here because we want to show one another who we are. We come with stacks of shitty little stapled Xerox things that have our whole selves inside them. We give them out in defiance and in love. We say, "This is me." So that's good. But what's even better is what happens in exchange. We turn and ask one another, "Who are you?" We tell each other it's okay to be honest. We reassuringly say, "We're into it." So we're handed someone else's shitty little stapled Xerox thing, and they say, "This is me." And we say, "I see you inside here." And we say, "Thank you." And we say, "I hope you make more."
Patchwork World is the embodiment of this ethos. It is a game with plain layout, with few pieces of custom art. It is a game with gentle prose and years of play experience, and all the yearning for connection that isolation and the threat of death drives a person toward. Whenever I've thought my games are unpolished, my layout too basic, I've thought of Patchwork World, and been immensely grateful that King wrote a game that gave me permission to say, this is enough. Games like this are why I love indie RPGs, and why I want more people in our circles to forego polish in favor of the weird and heartfelt. I'm not saying you can't do both, but what I am saying is that you shouldn't have to. Games are nothing without their words, and if that's all you have time for, if you don't want to wear the dozens of hats of game design, if you can't afford to pay for thousands of dollars of custom art, I hope indie designers truly believe that their words are enough. I want to see 100 shitty little stapled things and know there is another person inside them. I want to thank them. And no matter how commercially viable or cringy it might seem, I want them to never stop making more. Thank you everybody for watching. I really appreciate everybody who takes the time to get to the end of these videos and tune into what I'm saying about tabletop games. If you want to find more of my work, I'm at Monster Factory Fanfic on Tumblr, aavoit.bluesky.social on Bluesky, but my main site is aavoit.com, where I talk about games, writing, and health policy. I also do a couple of podcasts. The first is at Mortified Pod, where me and my friend Layla do critical media analysis. We just hit 150 episodes and have a great clip show up. If you want to jump on there, it's a great starting point. And I do another show with my friends that's at The Bible Boys. My friends who are ex-evangelicals, Michael and Josh, and I all talk about Christian media. So if those seem like something you might be interested in, please check them out. Thanks as always for watching. My next video might be delayed because I'm moving. So we'll see how that goes. But until then, see ya.